You're listening to Discovering You Again Radio with Susan Axelrod. Women facing down the second half of life. Who are you putting first? Have you reached an age where you've seen it all, but still know there's more? Is life part 2 sneaking up on you? Look inside yourself and buckle up. We're just getting started. Don't settle for being comfortable in your skin. Break free and be radiant, inspired, confident, and abundant. These are your years. Take them and stop apologizing. Attack the second half of life with a purpose. Discovering You Again Radio with Susan Axelrod starts now.
Welcome, 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 everyone, to Discovering You Again Radio with Susan Axelrod. I am so grateful that you are here today for this important show. Oh boy, this is a big one. I feel like I say that every time, but it's because I work to get great guests and offer you great, meaningful content for women in the second half of life. I have such a special guest today. She single-handedly helped me transform my own ill-conceived thoughts about drug addiction, criminality, and social justice for women users. She will join me in my next segment. I hope you will stay tuned for that. But first, I want to talk about my Discovering You Again thesis. It's so relevant here. Where did it come from? How did it start? What is this all about? I want to let you know that all of this started by one single article. One study that I read led to an entirely new trajectory for me in my second half. The article was called 5 Ways That Middle-Aged Women Can Feel More Vital, Visible, and Relevant. Now, as an aside, I wonder if the author of that article, Dr. Michelle Martin, could ever know that that day that she was sitting writing that article several years ago now, that it would lead to a whole entire business model, the change in the trajectory of one woman's career. If you are a writer, I want to encourage you to write, because I have learned myself, as I am a writer, that you never really know the power of your own written words. You have no idea what the impact of those written words can be. So back to my thesis. 5 ways that middle-aged women can feel more vital, visible, and relevant. Visible, what is that about? What does that mean, visible? Visible is the opposite of invisible. As I did more research, and as this came to my awareness, for people, my listeners, I've got my fingers pointed at my head and my brain. As it came to my awareness, this topic of women in the middle of their lives and beyond feeling invisible, I did a lot more research. And I found out through also vetting, through reading and commenting on very large Facebook group threads, that women in midlife feel invisible. Why is this? Why was that? I started asking questions, and I started thinking and writing and working with coaching clients on this single topic. I call it finding voice. And that is what this radio show is about. And that's what it's for, to help women in the second half of life find voice. I have to say that I was a little surprised about the responses that I got, and it be from so many women all over the country and really throughout the world who are in community on Facebook, and also a little bit in LinkedIn, and surely from my research. I sort of, it was affirmed for me, I guess I want to say, it was affirmed for me, my idea that women spend the early part of their adult lives in this place of nurture and gathering, giving. We give for decades until we are really just depleted inside. And then after 20 years, 25 years of that giving to others, we find ourselves suddenly with more time, energy, maybe some resources, surely wisdom and experience and skills, but not knowing what to do with it. That led to conversation about my favorite thing, which is purpose. And purpose comes from passion. And so I spent a lot of time myself. I asked myself the questions. I asked about, am I in my own passion space? What does your passion space look like for you? What does it feel like for you? My work is so organic to me. It all stemmed from my own commitment and my own desire to live a meaning filled and purposeful second half of life. I found that I kept getting stuck. The word passion was like, is this my passion? Is this my passion? Is this my passion? I call that passion as a noun. And I transformed the word passion into a verb. What do I feel impassioned about? What impassions me? Right? As a verb, instead of landing on the seminal, big, concrete, black and white, yes or no, right or wrong passion, and knowing that I would fail, worrying that I wouldn't get it right, I turned passion into a verb. Now, I just spoke about this on my online course called what? Discovering You Again. Yes, I have an online course. It's an 8-week course where the participants are women in the second half of life looking for their own passion and purpose to become better defined. As I just spoke about this recently. So, first, I turned passion into a verb and I asked myself, what fuels me? What impassions me? And that led me to the next place, which was even more agony, and that is called purpose. When you feel invisible, you lack purpose. You wonder, what is my purpose? You're constantly asking yourself, what is my purpose anymore? My kids are grown and gone. My career is tired. The dog is gone. What is my purpose? And so again, I turned purpose into a different word, which is purposefulness. What feels purposeful? And so I want to ask you, what impassions you and what feels purposeful to you? And when I started asking myself these questions, and I did journaling, I did talk therapy, I did thinking, I did, sharing with my sister and my friends and various people. When I explored these ideas, the same thing for me kept coming up. I feel impassioned and on purpose when I help lift up others. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'm definitely getting a similarity there. And further, I felt seen and heard when I was in that passionate, purposeful space of lifting up others. What do I mean by that? They thanked me. They saw me. They heard me. I'm just one person. I'm just sharing my own experience with you so that you can have your own understanding of how you can go from feeling invisible to being seen and being heard, finding your own voice. This is the background, the foundation I wanted to set for our show today. The title of our show is When Purpose Finds You. I wanted to lay out the idea of finding your impassioned space, finding your purposeful space so that you can feel good and confident. I am, after all, a confidence coach. So that is my goal always with you and for you. When you break through and find this confident and comfortable and impassioned space, then you can confidently go forth. Now, what happens is sometimes purpose finds you. And I want to say that my special guest today was in that situation. She was going along in her life when purpose found her. Now, I am going to let her share her own story about how that happened. And when we come back after break, you are going to be amazed at what happens when you open your eyes, when you are able to breathe and feel clear, when you find that passion inside yourself again. This is one of the things that I hear about very often, is that people say, I lost my passion. I don't have that passion anymore. And so when you find that, that space inside yourself where you can feel again, you know me, I talk about soul connection, right? Your soul is your place of deepest feeling. And when you can find that soul connection, you can feel that feeling space, you can find your passion, you can grow to purpose, you can feel on purpose. That is where impact and legacy lives. And so that is what we are going to be exploring with Tonia Groves Ahern in our next segment. She is going to share her personal journey, which is quite extraordinary, with us, and I can't wait for you to hear it. So stay tuned, folks. Get your pen and paper out. We're going to be talking resources, and you are going to learn something that you had no idea about. I promise you that. So stay tuned. We are going to go to break, and I will see you on the other side of break.
You're watching the Transformation Network on transformationtalkradio.fm.
Okay, folks, we are back. Thank you, thank you, thank you for coming back. Things are about to get real here. I am beyond delighted to introduce my very special guest, Tonia Groves Ahern. I knew Tanya as Tonia Groves. She was just someone who was in my high school class. And we were friendly in high school, but as with most people, we lost touch over the years. I had no idea what was going on in her life. Eventually, we connected up on Facebook. And, as you do, Facebook for me has been a wonderful way to be a window. I see it as sitting on the window ledge of somebody else's life. And so I began to glean some things that was going on in Tanya's life, some very difficult things. And I watched with curiosity and just observed how it was all going. 4 years ago, we had a high school reunion. No, I will not tell you what number reunion it was. Suffice to say, a reunion. And Tanya and I had an opportunity to talk. What I heard astounded me. Tanya freely, easily, it appeared easy. We can ask her about that, but it appeared easily, shared with me and my dear friend Leela, also from our high school class, the fact that she became a mother with a child struggling with substance use and a mental health disorder. And otherwise, AKA to me, drug addiction. What I have learned and observed and seen with my own eyes in the last 4 years has been truly, honestly, really nothing short of astounding. Even then, when Tanya shared so bravely and openly about her personal experience, which I am lucky and blessed and grateful to say was not my own, it was not in my personal experience, I paid attention. And over these last 4 years, I have seen an intensity of Tanya's influence in the area of educating, edifying, and enlightening people about substance use, mental health diagnoses, and the what do I call it? Like the transformation of language. So I want to get right into this now. Tonia Groves Ahern, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I want to really ask you one question, and that is stems from my work in confidence. You know that I teach the confidence zone, standing squarely, firmly in the middle of the confidence zone. And I do want to ask you, how did you find the confidence to get out there and really talk about this and eventually come to be doing what you're doing?
I would have to say that, we struggled as a family for a couple of years, actually. I mean, we did what every family did. We were in denial. We were angry. We were frustrated. We were scared. When we realized that my son was struggling, it was right when everything was starting to happen with opiates and people were dying. So it was very frightening, but frustrating because there weren't resources, and we really did not reach out to anyone. Our family went from, we were, fun and had people over and had parties and for holidays, to not being comfortable being around anyone because we felt judged by everyone,
Mm,
even though they didn't really, well, they probably did know, but we were hoping they didn't know. So
mm,
I just happened to find a group of women through a website called Faces and Voices of Recovery. And it was for a group of women called it was Parent to Parent. Three of these women had lost their children. One had a son who struggled, and they decided they were going to do something to help other families. I talked to them for probably 2 hours, or I cried for 2 hours,
mm,
which was the first time that I was able to just let it all out. And I became educated in 2 hours from these women. And I learned that compassion and the empathy that they gave me was healing. And I wanted to be able to help other families as well.
mm.
Um, I think they changed my life. They actually changed my life. And at the
Wow.
same time, I also I found somebody else on that same website, who was Brian McAllister, who's actually from New Jersey, who wrote a book called Full Recovery. And I called him. He made me read the book before he
Mm,
would talk to me.
mm.
And his book was all about his own recovery. First time I knew anything about recovery. So after, you're hearing this compassion from the families, these women, and then we learn about the power of hearing somebody talk about recovery and that there's hope. It just changed everything for me. And I decided that I needed to speak out to help other families.
Wow. You know that we're streaming live on Facebook, so there is a visual going on here. While also this is a radio show, and I want to tell people who are seeing me on Facebook, I'm literally writing notes already down from. I'm not looking away doing anything else. I'm writing notes down from what Tanya is saying. I wrote down compassion from families. That is the thing that they really, you say, quote, they changed your life, and that they were able to listen with compassion and share with honesty and, show you, I guess, like, I'm wondering if maybe they showed you what it's like Tanya, I'm gonna apologize in case I say any language wrong, okay?
That's
Because
okay.
I
It
know
takes practice. It's
it
practice.
does, and I'm learning a new language. I'm learning the language of substance use and recovery, so thank you. Okay, so now I wanna go back and say what I wanted to say. Um, I wanna ask you if they're, bravely and honestly and compassionately sharing with you, showed you, role modeled for you, ho that there's no shame in this, something about no shame.
Exactly. I mean, that is the biggest part. There was no judgment. There
Mm,
was no shame. They made me feel like, well, they really made me understand this was a disease. This is an illness, and this is not something that my son was doing to me. It was something that was happening to him.
mm.
And it actually took years before I really understood the mental health piece of it. I only really knew about the substance end.
So let's
Years.
let's just hit on that for a second, if we
Okay.
may. So, what would you be comfortable sharing about learning about the substance use end?
Well, my son has given me permission to say everything because he actually takes credit for everything I do. So
Ah, wonderful.
yeah, it actually works out very well. In the beginning, one of the things I have to say is that he was diagnosed ADHD very early. Well, not early, I mean, very late. It was in 8th grade. A teacher actually said to me, I had another teacher's meeting, and, they always said the same thing. He's so bright, he just doesn't apply himself, and he's always acting out in class. And a teacher didn't show up for the teacher meeting, and she grabbed me in the hall and she said to me, "What did they say to you?" And I told her what they said, and she said, "Okay, so I see something different. I see frustration. I see somebody who wants to do well, but is frustrated. And I think you need to get him tested." So we did get him tested for ADHD, but it was late. 8th grade is late. And so some of those patterns had already started. Some of his behaviors, trying to cope with his own issues, had already started.
Wow.
So before we knew it, he was self-medicating, and it was anything really. It started maybe alcohol, marijuana, but it wasn't about the substance. It was anything. The other thing is, he rode dirt bikes, and I heard stories about him riding that he was just a daredevil. He was dangerous. Anything to get that rush is what he was looking for. So, I didn't really put it all together until, all of a sudden somebody actually said to me, that he's using heroin. And I just couldn't believe it. I don't know anyone who used heroin. And to think that, your child, we live in a nice neighborhood, we have a business, like it was just a shock. It was a shock until he was actually arrested for a possession charge. And we had no choice then, but to realize.
Right. There's a lot to unpack in there. That's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. There's many pieces that we could do a whole show on, just a little slice of what you said, but I really want to stay with this topic because I've learned so much, and that is really what I want to use this platform for. So, you say, I was in a middle class suburb, we own a business, I didn't know anybody who used heroin in my life. There's all kinds of questions. Where did he get heroin, and all of that. But basically, in the end, something happened that you couldn't deny, like you couldn't ignore. He got arrested, you said.
Right.
And so now bring us forward to the mental health diagnosis piece and how that
It all fit
together. Yeah.
Right. So when he was a freshman in high school, the school actually ended up taking him out and testing, because I had him tested myself. The school decided to test him when he was a freshman, and he was also diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Which, there is a family history, because sometimes we don't know, everyone will say, oh, everybody, well, first of all, they say everybody's ADHD, everybody's diagnosed as bipolar. But there are, people are actually, that is a true diagnosis for a lot of people. We did try some medications to help him, but he had already found the ones that worked for him. So trying to get someone to try medications that don't work immediately, when you find something that's working immediately, was difficult. So he didn't comply with anything we did. And we actually went to a psychiatrist who never saw us again after this, because he said to her, he tried to tell her what to prescribe him, and because he knew what worked. And she said, no, this would be, and he said, what, you don't know, you've never taken these medications. She said, well, if I was a brain surgeon, would I have to have brain surgery before I could, do his brain surgery? And he said, yes. And she said, that's it. I don't want to talk to you. I can't deal with addicts. And he left.
I can't deal with addicts. Very nice.
Yes,
Okay.
Yes.
So I want to say that I can't believe it, but we already made it through almost a whole other segment of the show. We're going to keep going. We're going to blow right past the break.
Right.
I don't want to do any breaks here. This is important stuff. I just want to say again, thank you. Thank you for sharing this. I want to thank your son. Give him a hug for me.
Right.
Thank him for taking the credit and, lifting you up and, allowing us to speak freely. Why? So that we can learn, we can share, we can use this platform, we can give voice, to those people who need voice. So again, he was already into those teen years. He already found something that worked. And so embedded in here, I hear with my coaching hat on struggle, that you,
Mhm.
from your perspective, that you would have been, I call it in the struggle stew, where
Right.
you're like spinning just in this hot stew of struggle around what do I do? What should I do? What can I do? And, uh, and then mostly all of that seemed was out of your control. Would that be accurate to say?
Yeah, and on top of all that, there weren't resources like we have now. There were a lot less resources. No one talked about it.
Wait, when was this again?
So this was 2000, let's say 2000. I'm trying to think when he graduated, 10. So probably 2008, 2009.
Eight,
And,
nine,
and
10, less resource, fewer
right,
resources. Go ahead.
right. But the other thing too that no one talks about, well, we're starting to talk a little bit about it finally, is the rest of the family. Because now we have all the siblings that are thrown in the middle of this trauma, because it is trauma. They've all been traumatized. And there is a certain amount of trauma with anyone whenever a family member has an illness.
Mm.
There is a certain amount of trauma, but it was a different kind of trauma because it wasn't accepted. Nobody was bringing dinners to our house. Nobody was saying, hey, while you take care of your son, we'll take your kids to soccer practice. And nobody does that. So we were so
Wow.
alone,
Yeah.
and then it became too, when people find out, all of a sudden they don't want their children or your children,
Right now
because
there's
it must be
stigma.
something, right? It must be something the parents doing, so it became more isolating, and that's when I started speaking out, and I started, we just happened to start going to some county meetings just to talk in general in the county about what was going on with drug use. And I started speaking out, and then they just couldn't shut me up,
Okay.
basically.
All right. So let's, I just have to breathe through all of this. This is just so amazing. I'm so happy right now that we're doing this. So you take a breath, and I want to say that I can be found every day on my Facebook page, Susan Axelrod. Look me up. That's where you find me. I hang out there every day. I have a daily Facebook Live. My website is called whatwillyourlegacybe.com. Um, and that's how to get in touch with me. Why am I saying that? Because you may want to get in touch with Tanya, and I am your conduit. Find me anywhere on the internet. I am the Facebook confidence coach. If you look for me, you're going to find me. Okay, so I let them know that there may be a lot of questions, and there's a lot more to say about this, Tanya, but I really want to move into this idea of how purpose found you, which you just said. And that's when I started to speak out. So I want for our listeners, what is this? This is Discovering You Again Radio. This is for women in the second half of life on finding that passion, that purposefulness that allows them the energy to really, create legacy in the second half of their life. So, Tanya, now we know a little bit. I'm sure it's just like a thumbnail deep of your story, but now we begin to see how purpose found you. And I think of you as an advocate. I've been telling everyone, that you have become an advocate. So would you agree that it's accurate to say that purpose found you? And
Oh,
that's,
absolutely.
yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And I think the women that I met, the parent to parent, they were advocates. And in fact, they actually got a rehab open for adolescents in South Jersey, which is unheard of. It took them 8 years to do it, but they were advocates, and they connected me to other people, other family members, and other people in recovery, which became like a whole new family. There's all of a sudden I had this recovery community, and that was made up of family members and of people who have struggled themselves. It was
Right.
amazing. It was
This
amazing.
reminds me, folks, listeners and viewers, Tanya and I have had several conversations now, and I'm just in agony at how little time this is. But you just reminded me when you used the word recovery. I want to talk a little bit about the language definitions, the transformation of language. You taught me, we don't say drug addicts anymore. We say substance users. And I want to encourage you, I want to ask you to talk about the idea of recovery as we were talking about it the other night.
Right. I think that it's very, so there's so many deaths, and I think we have to understand that a lot of this comes from the deaths. That there is this idea that if somebody has a problem with substances, that they're not going to recover, and that they're doomed basically. And it's very difficult for someone to get well when everyone thinks you're not. It's just not possible. It's
Oh my
difficult,
gosh.
but
Mhm.
with support. And actually, what's the thing that's funny is that for years families were pushed away on the treatment side.
Mm.
Nobody wanted the families involved because we were part of the problem, but we're actually part of the solution. So as we get well and we get educated, and I took all kinds of classes where I learned how to change how I react to my son, how to change the discussion, and to actually be able to have a discussion with him and to help motivate him. It's no, I am part of the solution for him. So,
Where did you find these classes and stuff? Like,
so
where?
there's a group called Partnership for Drug Free Kids, which is a national organization, and they do
Okay.
what they call the CRAFT model, which is community reinforcement and family training. Dr. Bob Myers wrote that program. The partnership has a call line that's national, and they give everyone free parent coaches.
Okay,
Um,
people, take out your pens and paper. What's the name of the organization again?
Partnership for Drug Free Kids, and
Okay,
the website's drugfree.org. Can't get any easier than that.
perfect.
This organization, is everything's free, and you can call and they'll connect you with a coach, and that coach will work with you for 4 or 5 weeks to try to help you with some of these skills. These skills change everything. Every family member I talk to that I go through these skills, their conversations change with their child, and not just that, but we also teach people self-care. They always say it's like the oxygen mask comes down from the airplane when there's a problem in the airplane. They always say, put it on you first, and then you put it on your child. We have to take care of ourselves, and then we can take care of our children. So we really become a resource for our children, and people do better when their family's supportive. They just do.
Tanya, I mean, I got to tell you something. First of all, I'm like, I'm just blown away. I'm just, even though we've had all of our conversations, even up to this point, I'm blown away all over again. So, I feel, first of all, I feel very emotional inside, and that's my sign for like real solid, intuitive, total hit. Okay. And secondly, I feel like there's a lot of people to hear the message that it's hard to get well when everyone thinks or knows you are not going to get well. To hear the message, we can be part of the solution. There's
Mhm.
coaching, classes, compassionate, loving
Yeah.
conversation by others available to us. These messages are profound.
I think, I said in the beginning that I cried for 2 hours when I talked to the women in parent to parent. We always laugh about it.
Mm,
Every single parent I talk to cries the first conversation. And then we laugh. And then we
mm,
laugh because it becomes you're not alone.
mm,
And all of a sudden, all these things that you're keeping inside and that isolation, you release all of that. And that's when you begin to heal and you begin to change. And then
mm,
we become the solution, then we become, you know, a positive piece to
mm,
this
mm.
illness.
That is so amazing. So, talk a little bit now about the nature of the work part that you're doing, because again, purpose found you, and in
Right.
your second half of life, is this what you imagine you'd be doing and planned to be
Absolutely
doing and
not.
thought and wanted to be doing? No.
No.
So talk about a little bit about the work that you do that
Well,
is in you.
what's funny is that you and I talked 4 years ago, and we talked about how, I volunteered everything. I mean, my poor husband paid for me driving all over the state to do these things. But it was a passion, and I couldn't stop, And we talked about, because you had said to me, you need to find a way to pay for this. You need to find a way that you get paid. And then just recently we were talking, and I said, I am paid now. I do work for somebody now. So I found the Mental Health Association. They actually asked me to speak on a panel, and the president from the Mental Health Association said to me, if I get money, I'm hiring you. So it took us 2 years. for her to find money, and she called me. And so now I work for them. And it's, they're advocates. They do public policy for the state, which is great. And I brought the addiction piece in to the Mental Health Association for co-occurring, because my son just doesn't have a substance issue. He also has the mental health issue, which is, so often we're not addressing that. And that is a really important piece. So
Do you feel like that is probably more common than is
yes,
realized?
yes. I'm going to guess, say 80% people
Right.
that have underlying mental illness. And most of the treatment centers just don't have the resources. We don't have enough psychiatrists in the whole country.
Mm.
So trying to get a psychiatrist to diagnose somebody, and then to have enough treatment time where someone can actually see what's going on, and really, really, it's hard with the substance issue too. You have to work with them together, but they're difficult to work together because you have to constantly reevaluate, because as they stop using substances, the mental health may change, medications change. But the Mental Health Association's been it's been a great way for me to advocate for co-occurring on the state. It gives me a bigger voice, even though I'm kind of hard to shut up.
Okay,
So I
hold on
kind of
one
have a
second.
good voice.
I want to park on that for a second. Don't forget, we're going to get back to that, but I want to park
Okay.
on that for a second. But I want to say, people, the year end is coming. The year end is the time of year that we give money away to worthy charitable organizations. Excuse me. If you have an MHA, a mental health association in your community, please consider research, of course, please consider supporting them with your philanthropic partnership. This is so important, what Tanya is talking about. There's so many layers. There's such a richness. Tanya, I'm looking at my notes, and one of the things we talked about was a substance use disorder. And you said to
Mhm.
me, substance use disorder is not a moral failing. It is defined as a chronic brain disorder. And I asked again yesterday, is it on the DSM? And you said, yes, it is. So it used to be called, what would you say? Is it right to say it used to be called addiction? And now
Yeah,
it's
it
called.
was it was always called addiction. I mean, we're trying to change language to be more person centered and more positive, less stigma. This is a disease that there's a lot of discrimination.
Mm.
So we're trying to really change that language.
Right. Okay. So that is huge. And I am your student, and now I'm
Yeah.
becoming the teacher, and I'm sharing my platform to give voice for people to understand language matters. I've learned this from Tanya. I've learned firsthand. I've learned language does matter, and it changes your own brain of the way that you think about it. And Tanya, honestly, frankly, we did. You did permit me to ask my questions, drug addicts and
Right.
criminals in jail, and, drug addicted people, I
Right.
mean, that,
But that's
making.
what we're learned. We've learned this. This is
Mm,
what we as a society has always said. So it's what, and I tell you who's changed it is the recovery community has changed it. It used to be that, people were in 12-step meetings, and and everything was in the basements, and no one talked about anything outside the basement, in these meetings. Well, now we've got a whole new generation of young people in recovery who want to talk about it, and they want to stop that. They want people to learn and understand what they've gone through, what they do go through. So they're the ones who really started the change in the language. I also work with the part-time for the National Council for Alcoholism and Drug Dependence in New Jersey, which NCAD, New Jersey.
okay.
NCAD is all about recovery supports and recovery messaging, and they're huge. I mean, we have a whole training. Every training they do is free. We have a training that's just on language and how to
Mhm.
tell your story, because the
Right.
stories are so important.
Right. So
Um,
let me just interrupt and say, we're blowing through
the next
another
step.
break. We're going straight through. I don't know. I hope the producer is okay with that, but we're going to the end, and that's going to be the end of the show. So,
Right.
but we have to just keep going because this is important stuff. I don't want to take time to make a break. Okay, I just got the okay signal from my producer. Thank you so much. Okay, let's talk about stories, Tanya. I mean, you're coming on here and sharing your own story. My son was using heroin. I mean,
Right.
that's something that, you're and you and those other families that you spoke about, they shared their stories with you. One of the
Right.
things that I've learned from you since we started, it was only a few weeks ago that we met up again after the 4
Right.
years prior, and and that led to all of this that you shared with me was something that was, really too much to bear. And I want to really ask you to speak about this. Let's speak about the thing that is on your mind the most, and that is how women are treated. Women substance users are treated in general and in jail.
So this, it's one of those things at a purpose that just happened. Yeah. And it seems like this happens with me. First it was about the families, and then it was, and resources, and then it was about language, and it's always going to be about the public policy, legislation, those kind of things. But all of a sudden, this happens all the time. I get one woman that was pregnant who reached out to me for some support, and then all of a sudden, and part of it's their fault, the women I talked to, because then they start giving my name to everybody else. Then I
Mm,
start getting phone calls from people in jail that say, "Oh, hang on, I have someone else." I always did this visual that they're all lined up in the jail to talk to me.
yeah.
So but
Mm,
I but what's really sad is that, there is a way, if a woman is a substance user and she finds out she's pregnant, they're supposed to be taking medication. That's the safest. That's what you need to do when you're pregnant and you have a diagnosis for substance use disorder. So women are doing what they're supposed to do, and there's women who are they're truly in recovery, and they are so judged, and they have their baby thinking they're doing everything right, and they're still judged. And some of them get thrown into the system where they actually have threats of taking their children away, even when they're doing what they're supposed to do, because it's everyone's waiting for them to fail.
mm.
It's very sad, because we're talking about, it's one thing if somebody's struggling the whole time that they have an infant and they're struggling. It's another thing when people are doing what they're supposed to do and they still are judged. It's
Mm.
very difficult.
I want to hold here for a second because I want to invite our listeners to take a breath, open their minds, open their hearts, and imagine what we're talking about. Most people are not born, to grow up and become a drug addict, a
Right.
substance user. Things happen that lead
Mhm.
to that result, as we've just heard in your own family. And that's one of the places where I did take a breath. I did open my mind. I did open my heart, and I'm learning. And so, regular people like me, imagine someone sitting in jail. Again, I'm going to do air quotes on the drug addict sitting in jail. Now I
Right.
know it's a substance user sitting in jail. And now you're telling me that women in particular are really, have even more difficult challenges by being judged.
Yes, they do. And
Mhm.
everyone looks, even when, like I said, even if they're doing everything perfect, if they're using, a medication, which, there's medications that are used all the time when women are pregnant. If you have a physical illness, and you have to be on medication, you're on that medication, or they
Mm,
find a safe medication that won't harm the baby. So
right.
we're doing the same thing with the substance use disorder, yet people look at them like they're terrible people, and they're
Mm,
actually doing what's safest for the baby.
mm,
And yes, is it sad that babies will have to go through a withdrawal process? But there is a process for that where they're not suffering.
mhm.
And we really try to educate the mothers through this process too, to to do everything they need to do to keep that baby safe.
So, I see the cape on your back. I see the Cape Crusader, and people may recognize in my Discovering You Again thesis, I actually have an orange cape because I do believe that we are the superheroes. In my last radio show, I spoke directly to Melinda Gates, who claims to be investing $1 billion over 10 years in the issue of gender equality. And I called out to her and said, "We are your army." And likewise
Absolutely.
on this, I see, Tanya, the cape on your back. I want to pivot before I lose time, before we end the show. I want to pivot to a very, very important place. It's the discovering you again place for you in your second half. One of the things that intrigued me most, which was the area of now what you may be working to change policy in the state of New Jersey, which we know, could have trickle down effects in other states, et cetera. How did it come about that you now suddenly know how to create change in policy?
So that NCAD, the organization, I volunteered with them since 2012. In 2013, we actually helped to pass legislation, the Overdose Prevention Act, which was allowing Narcan to be used by or to be bought by any family member. It was given to first responders. I mean, it's changed what's happening in New Jersey, where we're actually saving lives and giving people another opportunity to try to get them some resources. So when that happened, when there was a group of us, and there were mostly mothers in that group, when we got that bill passed, when Governor Christie signed that, and we were all there for the signing, that's where I got addicted to the whole policy thing.
Okay, that's legit stuff going on there. You're in the governor's office signing a bill.
Right. And when you see, when you see something like that, some change like that, that's really changed what goes on in the state, and you start realizing, you know what, I can do this. Like, it's not like people say to me all the time. I mean, I have something, I'm working on something right now where people will say to me, this is something you can't change. I don't believe that. I don't believe that. I'll change it.
That's the woman in the second half, Tanya. That's the 50-plus-year-old woman who says, don't tell me I can't change it. Right?
No one
because
can tell
we
me
know better.
Right. And I was just in a meeting at the state yesterday, and I came out of the meeting, and there were a group of people there that know me. And I usually, if I get into the office, and I'm tracking down everybody while I'm in there. So they saw me first, and they were laughing because we were talking about pregnant women, and I was going off on them about the pregnant women and the discrimination. And they're like, we can't say anything. We can't say anything. And I'm like, you don't have to say anything. I'm going to do something. And they just laughed, and they said, we know you're going to do something. And because I don't give up. I don't give up on people, and I'm not going to give up on something. When I see discrimination, I'm not giving up on that.
Oh my God, Tanya, I'm like in total chill mode. I am literally getting chills because I had Kelly Walk-Hines as a guest on my show. I don't remember when that was, weeks ago, or I can't really remember when that was, but I remember what she said. She is an advocate for domestic violence awareness. She is a survivor herself, and she is changing the, the conversation around that. And she said the same thing that you're saying. There's no giving up. And that's what women in the second half know. There's no giving up. There's only going forward.
Would you tell Melinda Gates to call me?
When she calls me, you're going to be on my army. I will be one of her generals.
I'm going to get these women. I need to take care of these women.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I wrote a note to myself was exactly what we were just talking about. I wrote down, don't let anyone tell you that change isn't possible. It can be complicated, and it may not always look the same as you originally thought, but it is possible. And then you said, I wrote the quote, the most important thing I do is to connect people who can work together for a common goal. So I really want to get this in there. My mind was blown and expanded when you talked about this, because you are like a regular person. You were like a high school classmate of mine, right? But here you are now having a lens and a filter and an ear and a sense to know, if I speak with that person and I speak with that person and I suggest that person speak with that person, that there's this interconnectedness that has you traveling on the road. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's the best part of all of this to me. There's no place for ego. It's really about, we can't do this alone. There's so many pieces to everything. And when I start connecting people to other people, if someone calls me, I give them a number to somebody else, and I just keep connecting them, because those connections have really made changes in the state that people don't even know about. Like there's things that have started that I started and then I just let it naturally happen. All these connections work together.
That's another thing about women in the second half. We don't have egos.
No, I don't need to be, no one has to say that, oh, you started this. I don't care. All I care about is those connections happened, and what took place after that was amazing. And it made changes to people's lives.
All right. I just got the 2-minute warning. I'm having a hard time breathing because there's so much more to say. First of all, vis-a-vis exactly what you just said, I don't believe you have a personal website. You don't have any personal online persona. I suppose people could find you on Facebook if they want.
Yeah.
Right, if they want to find you. But I do have a website. I have multiple websites. I have multiple Facebook pages. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. Look up Susan Axelrod. What will your legacy be? And you will find me. I am a confidence coach. You will find me. If you need to get through to Tanya, I can, connect you up. Okay. Number 2. What is it that you want to leave people with from this conversation today, Tanya? What might you say in just very briefly?
I want to say not to give up on people, and give people, it's not an easy illness. It's not easy for families, but I really think that there is hope out there. I think that recovery is not just possible, but we should expect recovery. And that, there are resources to help people, as family members included. And we need to make some changes. We need to decriminalize this disease because, it's horrible that we're holding people in jail just because they have an illness. It's just unacceptable to me.
It's a whole, opening of the mind. So look, my work is in confidence. My work is in the confidence zone. That's the nature of the work I do every day. I had 2 different clients this morning tell me, thank me for helping them get more confidence so that they can do what they want to do. And that is underlying this. What you have learned today, watching Tanya and her second half and her trajectory, comes from confidence, which comes from purpose, which comes from passion, and stems in self-care. So I have a lot more to say about self-care. I think I'm going to talk about that on my next show. Tanya, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's great talking to you.
Thank you. You too. And I'll be talking to you soon.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. See you next show. Bye.
You've been listening to Discovering You Again Radio with Susan Axelrod on Transformation Talk Radio. Thank you for tuning in as Susan Axelrod helps answer that burning middle-aged question, what now? Get ready to dive in and be radiant in your skin. Connect to a dialogue of fun, encouragement, and new ways to tackle your future. For more about Susan, go to www.whatwillyourlegacybe.com.